Welcome to The Explainer. Right now, Sudan is being torn apart by a devastating civil war. You've probably seen the headlines about political rivalries and territorial disputes, right? But beneath all that, there's actually a single, incredibly powerful commodity driving the bloodshed: gold. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how this precious metal became the ultimate prize. 10 million. 10 million people have been displaced since April 2023. It's an unimaginable human cost. Yet, in stark contrast to this massive suffering, sits the multi-billion-dollar wealth of Sudan's gold reserves. It's just a brutal reality. The very resource that could build a nation up is currently being extracted, literally at gunpoint, to tear it down. So here's our agenda for today's Explainer. We'll start with Sudan's deadly gold rush, then look at the factions fighting for mines. From there, we'll cover the regional proxy war, how global powers enter the fray, the smuggling shadow economy, and finally, how to stop conflict gold.
All right, Section 1, Sudan's deadly gold rush, from oil to gold. To really understand what's happening right now, we gotta look back a bit. Before 2011, Sudan's economy ran mostly on oil. But when South Sudan seceded, boom, Sudan lost 2/3 of its oil revenue pretty much overnight. That massive economic shock triggered an immediate, totally unregulated artisanal gold boom. Hundreds of thousands of unemployed youth suddenly rushed to the mines. To keep a grip on things, military elites used a policy called tamkeen, which was basically a way to empower their loyalists and security forces by handing them these new corporate mining assets. Fast forward a bit to a civilian transition period after the fall of the Bashir regime. Reformists tried to audit this military-controlled gold wealth. And the military's reaction? A coup in October 2021. That ultimately fractured the military itself, and civil war erupted in 2023 as rival factions started fighting for absolute economic control.
Section 2. Factions fighting for mines. SAF versus RSF. Just think about the reality on the ground for a second. Picture a heavily armed guard standing watch over an artisanal gold mine in Hashaba. You literally have over 1 million traditional miners in Sudan doing this grueling, highly toxic work, extracting ore using mercury and cyanide. But heavily armed factions are the ones overseeing, taxing, and completely controlling the operations. It's this incredibly dangerous intersection where extreme resource wealth meets localized violence. So what's crucial here is understanding how these two main sides operate, because the SAF and RSF act almost like dark reflections of each other. The SAF, or Sudanese Armed Forces, controls the northern and eastern states. They leverage what's left of the official state apparatus to extract wealth, using state revenues, taxes, and royalties from international franchise companies coming back in. The RSF, on the flip side, controls the incredibly lucrative artisanal mines out in Darfur, places like Jebel Amer. They rely on sheer force. We're talking seizing major infrastructure like the Sudan Gold Refinery in Khartoum and literally going door-to-door looting private gold and jewelry from citizens. So you've got two entirely different extraction models, but they are funding the exact same war.
Moving on to Section 3, the regional proxy war, moving beyond borders. Because here's the thing, gold isn't just funding the local troops, it's buying regional allies. This is definitely not some isolated internal conflict. The SAF is primarily backed by Egypt and Eritrea, who, have their own strategic and security interests in the Horn of Africa. Meanwhile, the RSF has built up this massive support network backed by the UAE, utilizing logistical ties to Ethiopia, Chad, and actors in Libya. Basically, Sudan's gold acts as a hard currency to grease the geopolitical wheels. It pays for weapons, it pays for fuel, and it pulls neighboring countries right into the crossfire. And thanks to these really fluid, shifting alliances, getting a ceasefire is incredibly elusive. Just look at how tensions are ramping up. Recently, Sudan's SAF-led government actually accused Ethiopia of conducting cross-border drone strikes. Plus, there are major concerns over a new RSF training base in Ethiopia, allegedly funded by the UAE. And simmering underneath all of this, a broader geopolitical standoff between Saudi Arabia, who tacitly supports the SAF, and the UAE, who backs the RSF. The gold has essentially turned this civil war into a tinderbox, and it is seriously threatening to spark a massive regional conflagration.
Which brings us to Section 4, Global Powers Enter the Fray, the Geopolitics of Gold. Now, zooming out even further, Russia is strategically positioning itself to capitalize on all this chaos. Their Africa Corps, which you might know better as the successor to the Wagner Group, has a very direct hand in this. The SAF is actively trading lucrative gold mining concessions for Russian arms, drones, and military support. But it goes way deeper than that.
Russia is actually advancing diplomatic talks to secure a highly strategic Red Sea naval base at Port Sudan. They are even negotiating to open central bank branches in Sudan just to settle gold transactions in rubles. I mean, this is textbook resource diplomacy.
But hey, it's not just Russia. Desperate for immediate wartime cash, the SAF is making massive diplomatic pushes to bring Chinese mining companies back into the fold. They're offering up security guarantees, hoping that getting China back into their territories will quickly add an estimated 6 to 7 tons of annual gold production directly to their war chest. All right, Section 5, the smuggling shadow economy, the missing gold. We absolutely need to talk about the missing gold. 2 tons. I really want you to remember this shockingly low number. According to official statements, 2 tons was the total declared industrial gold production in Sudan for all of 2023. As state oversight completely collapsed and foreign workers evacuated when the war started, the official books showed almost nothing. But come on, we know the mining on the ground never actually stopped.
Now, contrast that tiny 2-ton figure with the aggressive spike in exports flying out of Port Sudan. From just 71 kilos in October 2023, it exploded to over 2,000 kilos by January 2024. That is a massive 2,739% spike in just a few months. And remember, this is only what's being pushed through their newly aggressive export policies. The undeniable reality here is a thriving multi-billion-dollar shadow economy. It's estimated that up to 60% of production in SF areas alone is being smuggled totally off the books, mostly directly into Egypt and the UAE.
And what's truly tragic about all of this is how the shadow economy intersects with the humanitarian crisis. These smuggling routes moving gold north to Egypt or west to Chad, they aren't just moving metal. They are frequently the exact same networks running human trafficking operations. Desperate refugees fleeing the violence are now being forced to pay smugglers in gold, sometimes up to 30 grams per person, just to secure passage across the border. It's just a horrific cycle where the exact same currency funding the war is literally being used to exploit its victims.
Finally, Section 6, How to Stop Conflict Gold. Actionable steps.
Let's walk clearly through these actionable steps, because choking off this supply chain is absolutely critical to forcing a ceasefire. Step 1. The international community must officially classify Sudan's gold as a conflict mineral. This means invoking frameworks like the Dodd-Frank Act to force corporate transparency. This ensures the gold inside your smartphone or the jewelry you're wearing isn't secretly funding a war zone. Step 2. We need way stricter targeted penalties. This means heavily sanctioning the refiners, the illicit traders, and the private airlines facilitating all this smuggling. Step 3. Crucially, diplomatic leverage has to be applied to regional hubs, specifically the UAE and Egypt. They must be pressured to enforce strict due diligence and refuse to process smuggled unofficial gold. If you take away the international markets, the warlords' treasuries run dry.
Which leads us to this final provocative question. Can the world cut the gold supply before Sudan fractures entirely? The data makes it perfectly clear. Gold isn't just some byproduct of this war. It is the very oxygen keeping it alive. As long as this deadly gold rush remains highly profitable for local militias, regional proxies, and global powers, a sustainable peace is going to be impossible, and the people of Sudan will continue to pay the ultimate price. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep looking deeper.